They say the sky's the limit, but sometimes it's in the sky that we face our deepest limitations. When Ava Johnson stepped onto Flight 472, bound for New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport, she expected a typical journey home. But before she could even buckle her seatbelt, suspicious stares and hushed murmurs gnawed at the edges of her peace. By the time the flight attendants approached her, telling her she didn't belong in the first-class seat she had paid for in full, the stage was set for a confrontation that would rattle the entire aircraft and reveal a shocking twist no one saw coming. Ava Johnson woke up that morning with a strange blend of optimism and apprehension swirling in her stomach. The city lights of Los Angeles glistened beneath a sprawling pink sunrise as she prepared for her cross-country flight to New York. Though the early hour made her eyes heavy, her heart felt awake and alive. She had made a habit of traveling back and forth across the country for business, and routine familiarity usually soothed her. But that day, an undercurrent of tension nipped at the back of her mind. Dressed in a tailored, soft grey pantsuit that flattered her tall, lean frame, Ava arrived at Los Angeles International Airport LAX with her roller bag trailing behind her. Her smartphone vibrated with a new text: Delta Airlines Flight 472, on-time departure at 8:20 a.m. Gate 57B. She breathed a sigh of relief. Delays were common, and she couldn't afford one now. There was an important meeting awaiting her in Manhattan. Yet as she approached the first-class priority boarding line, Ava noticed a few sideways glances. Sometimes being a young black woman in a sleek designer suit raised eyebrows, perhaps because her poise and confidence didn't fit certain stereotypes. She ignored the stares the same way she always did, with practiced indifference and a polite, courteous smile. Ava handed her ticket to the gate attendant, a woman named Kara, with a warm smile that belied the exhaustion of a busy morning shift. "Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Please enjoy your flight," Kara said, scanning the e-pass quickly. Ava thanked her boarded and felt that fleeting worry melt away. She was used to traveling alone. She was used to people's prejudices. She was used to ignoring them. But this flight was about to test the bounds of her patience and her resolve. The first-class cabin exuded that familiar aura of early morning calm. Plush, wide seats, a hushed ambiance, and the faintest hint of fresh coffee lingered in the air. Ava found her seat easily 2A, a window seat that offered both privacy and the perfect angle to watch the sunrise. Once she stowed her carry-on and laptop bag, she sat down, grateful for the comfort. A flight attendant named Jacqueline, a middle-aged woman with salt and pepper hair, pulled into a tight bun passed by with a tray of orange juice and champagne for pre-departure drinks. Ava politely asked for a glass of fresh orange juice, feeling too weary for alcohol that early in the day. Everything appeared normal, and Ava allowed herself to relax. She opened her laptop, checking emails for the final details of her upcoming meeting. She was reviewing a contract for a new philanthropic initiative her family's foundation was launching. Although most people knew her as Ava Johnson, business consultant, few realized she was also a significant shareholder in multiple ventures, among them a large stake in Delta Airlines itself. Jacqueline returned with the orange juice, and Ava thanked her. "I hope you have a comfortable flight," the flight attendant said, though her tone was slightly brisk. Ava chalked it up to morning rush stress. She turned back to her laptop, immersing herself in her notes. The cabin filled up steadily, other first-class passengers taking their seats, engaging in polite small talk. Ava took a moment to look around. She noticed a few fleeting, narrowed eyes cast in her direction. Perhaps it was her imagination. She tried to shrug off the creeping discomfort and focus on her work. That was when another flight attendant, tall white with a stern expression, approached, clearing his throat. "Excuse me, miss," he said. "Can I see your boarding pass?" Ava frowned slightly, but obliged, pulling out her phone to show him the digital pass. "Is there a problem?" she asked, trying to maintain her composure. He glanced at the screen, and for a moment his face remained neutral. Then he raised an eyebrow, gave a curt nod, and turned away without a word of explanation. Ava felt her heart quicken. Something was off, but she couldn't pinpoint exactly what. She told herself to wait and see. The cabin door closed, and the captain made a brief welcome announcement, informing passengers of the flight time to New York. Ava settled back into her seat, sipping her orange juice. As the engines revved and the plane pushed back from the gate, she thought the uneasy feeling might dissipate once the flight got underway. But right before takeoff, just as the cabin crew secured the overhead compartments and took their seats, the same stern flight attendant reappeared. He leaned down, lowered his voice in a conspiratorial whisper, and said, "Ma'am, you may have to move to coach. There's been an issue with your ticket." Ava's throat tightened. "An issue? My ticket is fine. I booked directly through the Delta app," she replied, offering the best calm voice she could muster. The flight attendant pursed his lips. "We received a notice from gate control that there might be a duplication or an upgrade error," he stated. His gaze flicked over to some passengers nearby, who were now openly watching the exchange. Jacqueline, the other flight attendant, emerged. She placed a hand lightly on the man's shoulder, as if to guide him away. But he waved her off gently, as if determined to handle this himself. Ava felt that old familiar burn of suspicion at the back of her mind. She had the right ticket, had followed all the correct procedures, yet she was being singled out. "Can you clarify what kind of issue exactly?" she asked, voice still measured. The flight attendant gave her a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'd rather discuss this in the galley," he said, motioning toward the front. "We need to do it before takeoff." Ava looked at him for a beat, then unbuckled her seatbelt. She was hyper-aware of the eyes on her, some curious, some seemingly hostile. As she passed, she caught snatches of murmured conversation. "She doesn't look like she's supposed to be here. Maybe she snuck up from coach." The words, though whispered, blared in her ears like sirens. The galley was cramped with several attendants, hurriedly preparing for takeoff. The stern flight attendant, whose name tag read Derek, gestured for her to stand by the wall. Jacqueline hovered nearby her eyes, darting between Ava and Derek. "Ma'am," Derek began, "we have reason to believe your seat assignment was part of a technical glitch. The seat might actually belong to another passenger." Ava took a breath, forcing herself to remain poised. "Didn't you scan my boarding pass at the gate?" The seat was confirmed. He folded his arms. "Yes, but the glitch might have occurred after that. I'm afraid you'll need to move to economy." Jacqueline tried to interject. "Derek, I verified the passenger manifest, and Ms. Johnson is listed in 2A. We never got a second passenger with the same seat." Derek glared at his colleague. "Then how do you explain the complaints?" Ava's eyes narrowed. "Complaints from whom?" Derek hesitated. "Some passengers indicated that you—" He paused, apparently choosing his words carefully. "That you don't appear on the manifest. It's causing confusion." Ava could only muster a grim smile. "That's not possible. As your colleague just stated, she verified I'm on the manifest." "My name is Ava Johnson. I have a valid boarding pass." The gate agent confirmed it. "I'm not moving from first class unless there's an actual error which by the evidence there is not. He stared at her, his eyes flicking over her face, her attire, as if searching for some telltale sign. Ava felt her patience slipping. She was about to speak again when Jacqueline subtly squeezed Derek's arm. "Look," Jacqueline said in a hushed tone. "We're about to taxi out. We should just let Miss Johnson return to her seat, and we can sort any confusion out once we're airborne." Derek exhaled long and frustrated. He gave Ava a thin-lipped, forced smile. "Fine. Return to your seat, Miss Johnson. I'll make a note of your refusal to cooperate." The coldness of his tone made Ava's chest tighten. Still, she decided to pick her battles carefully. She nodded and moved back into the first-class cabin. Behind her, she heard Derek mutter something under his breath, though she couldn't catch the words. Flight 472 finally took off its engines, cawing like some great metal beast as it soared into the early morning sky. Ava tried to bury her frustration in the soft hum of the cabin lights and the gentle whir of the plane's ventilation system. She glanced out the window, the city shrinking below them as they climbed higher. Just as she began to breathe more easily, a new tension brewed in the seats around her. The man across the aisle, who had earlier cast suspicious glances her way, coughed loudly, then muttered something to his seatmate. Ava caught the words, "shouldn't be here," and fraud. She felt her cheeks flush with anger. Meanwhile, a young couple in the row behind her whispered conspiratorially, shooting her quick, furtive looks. Ava tried to ignore it, focusing on the flight safety card in the seat pocket of all things, to keep her calm. But the hush of first class was now punctured by a low buzz of tension. Everyone seemed to know something was going on. About half an hour into the flight, as the cabin lights dimmed and the flight attendants began the meal service, Derek returned. This time, he walked directly to Ava's seat, carrying a small handheld device. He cleared his throat, but didn't offer a smile. "Ms. Johnson," he said formally, "I need to scan your boarding pass again. We've been reviewing seat assignments." Ava huffed, trying to maintain composure. "As I said before, I have my boarding pass on my phone." She pulled it up, feeling a swirl of dread in her stomach. This was harassment. Plain and simple. Derek took the phone, scanned it. The device beeped, then displayed a green check mark. He stared at it for a moment, as though expecting an error message that never came. He flicked his eyes to Ava, handed her phone back with a curt nod, and walked away without apology or explanation. Ava closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. Her frustration was mounting, but she held on to her composure. She had learned long ago that every act of discrimination could be weaponized against the victim if they let their emotions run free. She was determined not to give them that satisfaction. Just as dinner trays were being distributed, the plane experienced a mild bout of turbulence. Glassware clinked, and a couple of overhead bins rattled ominously. Most of the first-class passengers and cabin crew brushed it off as routine. But Ava, who had flown frequently, recognized the shift in tension. People were on edge. The plane's rocking only amplified the discomfort swirling through the cabin. The turbulence settled. Jacqueline soon reached Ava's seat with a warm meal. "Ms. Johnson, chicken or vegetarian pasta?" she asked softly. "Chicken, please," Ava responded, grateful for some normalcy. Jacqueline leaned in as she handed Ava the tray. "I'm sorry about all this," she whispered, her voice tinged with genuine concern. "I don't know why he keeps insisting there's a problem. Your seat is definitely valid." Ava swallowed. "Thanks. I appreciate you saying that. I'm sure it's some misunderstanding." Jacqueline's eyes flicked around, as though aware that the conversation could be overheard. "I'll do what I can," she added, before moving on to the next seat. Throughout the meal, Ava tried to enjoy the food, but found it difficult to stomach. The constant underlying sense of being watched and judged made her every bite taste bitter. She picked at her chicken, her eyes flicking out the window at the endless clouds. She was replaying in her mind the humiliations she had faced in her life, small and large. This scenario wasn't new, but it was one of the most blatant she'd experienced in a while. About 2 hours into the flight, an older man in a navy blue business suit got up from his seat in 2C and stretched. He then walked over to Ava's seat, balancing carefully as the plane made a slight turn. Ava braced herself for another confrontation. Instead, he offered a gentle smile and a hand. "Hello, I'm Martin Rhodes," he said quietly. "I couldn't help noticing the trouble you've been having." Ava paused, assessing. Martin looked to be in his late 50s, with a kind face and a refined demeanor. She shook his hand. "Ava Johnson," she replied softly. He leaned against the side of the seat opposite hers. "I'm sorry about the tension. Some of these passengers, well, they seem to think you're here illegitimately." Ava bit her lip. "I can tell," she said dryly. Martin sighed. "It's not right. I tried to talk to that flight attendant, Derek, but he brushed me off. Said it was none of my concern. I'm not sure how else I can help, but I wanted you to know not everyone here is suspicious of you." Ava felt a wave of gratitude. "Thank you. Your support means a lot." He patted the seat rest gently. "If it escalates, let me know. I'll back you up. I may not have an official position of power, but I do have some connections at Delta." His eyes twinkled, hinting at some behind-the-scenes clout. Ava smiled. "I appreciate that. Truly." As Martin returned to his seat, Ava felt a glimmer of hope. Not everyone was against her. Maybe she wasn't as alone in this cabin as she felt. The flight wore on, and night gradually fell outside the windows. Time seemed suspended in the confines of the aircraft, where emotions had simmered to a near boil. Derek was making rounds collecting trays and offering coffee, but each time he passed Ava, his posture stiffened. She noticed him exchanging pointed looks with a few passengers, as if continuing a silent conversation. At one point, 2 of the economy flight attendants, friends of Jacqueline, came forward to help with the unexpected passenger load. Ava overheard bits of conversation laced with her name. "Yes, Ms. Johnson in 2A. They keep scanning her pass. So bizarre." She tried to block it out by immersing herself in a movie on the in-flight system, but her mind was too restless. Just when she thought matters might settle, the seatbelt sign pinged on, and the pilot's voice crackled through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're expecting moderate turbulence ahead. For your safety, please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." People stirred, annoyance washing over them as the prospect of another bumpy patch loomed. But for Ava, turbulence was the least of her worries. 30 minutes into the turbulence, Derek and another flight attendant, a younger woman named Marissa, came to Ava's seat. Derek's jaw was set, his eyes cold. Marissa clutched a tablet, looking nervous. "Ms. Johnson." Derek began in a tone that suggested he'd been preparing this speech. "We have reason to believe you're flying under false pretenses." Ava's heart pounded in her ears. She tried to keep her voice steady. "What exactly are you implying?" Marissa lowered her gaze as Derek continued. "Some of the other passengers have complained that you're not the rightful occupant of this seat, that you might be using a stolen or fraudulent boarding pass." A ripple of gasps broke out in the surrounding seats. Ava felt the blood rush to her face. She stared at Derek in disbelief. "That's absurd. You've scanned my pass twice and everything checked out." Marissa fumbled with the tablet. Yes, the system does show Ms. Johnson's seat as valid Derek. Derek's glare cut across Marissa. Yet we have repeated complaints and contradictory reports from the gate. I'm going to have to ask you to come with us, Ms. Johnson, so we can investigate further. Ava's pulse roared in her ears. Repeated complaints. From whom? She looked around at the passengers, many of whom were now blatantly eavesdropping. Some looked shocked. Others seemed vindicated, as if they'd known all along something was off about her. This was more than a misunderstanding. This was a blatant, coordinated harassment. I'm not leaving my seat, Ava stated firmly, unless you can produce evidence of these so-called fraudulent claims. Martin Rhodes from across the aisle rose part way. Derek, I've personally seen Ms. Johnson's pass. This is outrageous. Derek shot Martin a withering look. Sir, please remain seated. This is airline policy procedure, and it does not concern you. It concerns all of us if you're harassing a passenger. Martin retorted, his voice surprisingly loud for such a refined gentleman. The tension hung thick in the cabin. Ava pressed her hand to her chest, trying to quell the panic building within her. She needed to keep a level head. If she lost her temper, it would only confirm whatever stereotype these people held about her. Derek's nostrils flared. Ma'am, last warning. You either come with us willingly to sort this out, or we'll have to inform the captain of your non-compliance. A hush fell. Passengers could sense the situation escalating. A child in economy began crying, perhaps rattled by the raised voices. With trembling resolve, Ava unbuckled her seatbelt and rose. Before she left, she locked eyes with Martin, who gave her a supportive nod. Then she followed Derek and Marissa into the galley once more, her heart hammering a beat of indignation and dread. The galley lights flickered dimly, reflecting on shiny metal cabinets. The hum of the aircraft felt magnified in the cramped space. Derek turned to face her, folding his arms. Marissa hovered at his side, looking uncomfortable. Are you going to explain what's happening? Ava asked, keeping her voice steady. Derek tapped at the tablet, brows furrowed. There are multiple passenger statements that you've bragged about being in first class illegally, that you claimed to have manipulated the app to get a free upgrade. Ava's eyes widened in shock. That is an absolute lie. I never said any such thing. I booked and paid for this seat. Marissa spoke up, voice trembling. Derek, the system logs show Ms. Johnson paid for her seat. He silenced her with a glare. Passengers have alleged that Miss Johnson threatened them if they questioned her presence in first class. Ava's mind reeled. Threatened them. I haven't spoken to anyone except you, Jacqueline, and Martin Rhodes. Derek shrugged, an air of mock regret in his posture. We have to take these complaints seriously. It's standard procedure to separate the passenger in question from the cabin until we can be certain everything is in order. Ava breathed in, steadying her voice. I see. So it doesn't matter that the actual records show I have a legitimate ticket. You're just going on hearsay from bigots. Marissa's eyes darted nervously as she recognized the tension in the conversation. Derek, maybe we should speak to the captain, review the official record. There's no evidence. Derek held up a hand. I'm acting in the best interests of flight security and the comfort of our passengers. Ms. Johnson, you can either stay in the galley until we land or take a seat in economy to avoid further conflict. In the back of her mind, Ava remembered the advice of her father. Never let them see you sweat. She steeled her spine, her voice calm. I will do neither. I intend to return to my seat in first class. If you have an actual security concern, call the captain. Let him address it properly." Derek opened his mouth to retort, but before he could speak, a new voice rang out. "I believe that's an excellent idea." Everyone turned to see Jacqueline, standing with a firm expression. Behind her was Martin Rhodes, who wore a look of steely determination. In Martin's hand was a phone with a text message open. Someone had evidently been briefed about the situation. Derek Jacqueline said, voice measured, "Let's get the captain down here. We have a passenger with a valid ticket who is being threatened with removal from first class with no substantial proof." Derek's face darkened. He pursed his lips as though weighing his next move. Finally, he nodded abruptly. "Fine. We'll involve the captain." He turned to Marissa. "Call him." Marissa quickly tapped an intercom code. Ava watched her heart pounding. This was it. They were about to escalate it further, which might lead to an emergency diversion or confrontation with authorities upon landing. But enough was enough. She wasn't going to be bullied any longer. Captain Thomas Reynolds had a composed aura about him when he stepped into the galley. A tall man in his early 50s, with streaks of grey at his temples, he exuded calm authority. It was evident he wasn't thrilled about leaving the cockpit mid-flight, but the seriousness in Marissa's voice had compelled him. He looked from Derek to Ava to Jacqueline and Martin, trying to piece together the tension. "I've been informed there's a significant dispute regarding seat assignments," he began, voice pitched to carry over the hum of the engines. "Please fill me in." Derek launched into his explanation, first painting Ava as a suspicious figure who other passengers believed had fraudulently acquired a first-class seat. Jacqueline stepped in, refuting Derek's claims by referencing the official passenger list. Martin added that Ava had been harassed multiple times, despite having all documentation in order. Captain Reynolds frowned, glancing at Ava. "Ms. Johnson, do you have your boarding pass and ID with you?" She produced her phone and her driver's license. The captain scrutinized them, cross-referencing the seat assignment on Marissa's tablet. Eventually, he returned them with a nod. "Everything checks out here." Derek's jaw tensed. "But we have passenger complaints." The captain held up a hand, silencing him. "Passenger complaints alone aren't enough if the documentation is valid. And clearly, Ms. Johnson's is valid. I see no cause to move her from her seat." A collective exhale seemed to ripple through the galley. Ava felt tears threaten at the corners of her eyes, tears of relief mixed with anger. Finally, an authority figure who sees reason. But the moment was short-lived. Captain Reynolds shifted his gaze back to Ava. "Ms. Johnson, I apologize for any inconvenience. However, in light of these complaints, it might be best for everyone's comfort if you'd be willing voluntarily to relocate to another seat, purely to avoid further confrontation." Ava stared at him, a fresh wave of anger boiling under her calm exterior. Of course, even though she was in the right, they wanted her to move for the comfort of those who had harassed her. She'd seen this play out in countless ways throughout her life, asking the victim to compromise to keep the peace. Martin spoke up. "Captain, that's hardly fair. Why should Ms. Johnson, who's done nothing wrong, have to move?" Captain Reynolds clasped his hands. "With all due respect, sir, we try to maintain a peaceful environment on board, Ms. Johnson has the right to remain in her seat legally and officially. However, sometimes the easiest path is the one of least resistance." Jacqueline looked at Ava, sympathy in her eyes, as if to say, "I get how unfair this is." But she said nothing. Ava realized that the well-intentioned staff members had their own limits within the company hierarchy. summoning her pride and dignity. Ava fixed her gaze on the captain. "I'm not moving. Respectfully, sir. Your job is to uphold the airline's policy and ensure my safety and comfort as much as any other passengers. I've complied with every request, and I'm done complying with bigotry." The silence was deafening. Even Derek looked taken aback by her resolute tone. Captain Reynolds nodded slowly. "Very well, Ms. Johnson. You have every right to remain in your seat." He turned to Derek. "Let's put an end to this matter, please. Ensure Ms. Johnson is not disturbed again." With that, the captain left the galley to return to the cockpit. A stormy expression crossed Derek's face, but he was outranked. "Yes, sir," he mumbled. Marissa gave Ava a relieved smile. Martin gently touched Ava's shoulder. "You stood your ground." "Good for you," he whispered, before following the captain back to the cabin. Ava couldn't ignore the trembling in her hands. She'd stood up for herself, something her family had taught her to do. But deep inside, she knew the night wasn't over. Racism didn't vanish just because a captain said, "Case closed." She would have to watch her back for the rest of the flight. When Ava finally returned to her seat, the first-class cabin was tense as a drawn bowstring. Some passengers stared openly, looking frustrated or suspicious. Others avoided eye contact as if embarrassed by the spectacle. Ava sank into 2A, feeling emotionally drained. She put on her noise-cancelling headphones and pretended to watch a movie, though her mind raced with each passing minute. She asked herself if she should have revealed her true affiliation with the airline, that she was a major shareholder, courtesy of her family's business acquisitions. She'd always valued her anonymity. Her father, a self-made billionaire with a deep commitment to economic empowerment, had groomed her to work quietly behind the scenes, only using her clout when necessary. Isn't this a necessary time? She wondered. She decided to hold her cards for a moment longer. Something told her the real moment to reveal her status hadn't arrived yet, and when it did, it would need to be done in a way that left no room for doubt. Several hours passed in uneasy silence. The flight plan took them over the Rocky Mountains under a moonlit sky. Through her window, Ava glimpsed silvery peaks and shadowy valleys far below. She tried to find serenity in the view, but her anger still simmered. Eventually, exhaustion overtook her. She drifted off into a fitful sleep, her dreams haunted by images of hostile faces and repeated demands to give up her seat. She woke with a jolt when the aircraft encountered another patch of turbulence. She noticed that Derek was leaning over, fiddling with the overhead bin above her. Her seat was in a reclined position, and she tried to sit up, her heart pounding. Derek glanced down, startled to see her awake. "Just securing the latch," he said curtly, but there was something off in his voice. Ava glanced into the bin, seeing only her carry-on bag and jacket. She found herself irrationally worried that he might tamper with her things, a paranoid thought, but not entirely unthinkable given the hostility he'd shown. She said nothing, only watched him. Derek muttered a final comment, something about passengers' safety, then moved away. Ava rubbed her tired eyes and checked her watch. They still had about 2.5 hours before landing at JFK. It felt like an eternity. Around 3 a.m. local time, the cabin was mostly silent, except for the hum of the engines. Ava's stomach rumbled softly. She hadn't eaten much of her dinner due to stress. She considered asking for a snack when she realized someone was standing next to her seat. "Excuse me." The voice belonged to a petite woman with short brown hair, wearing a professional blazer. She looked nervous. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I just wanted to say I'm so sorry you're going through this. It's completely unfair." Ava blinked, surprised. Oh, thank you. She paused, noticing the name on the woman's employee ID clipped to her jacket. Katie Donovan, Delta Corporate. Are you with Delta Corporate? Katie gave a nervous laugh. Yes, ironically. I'm in a regional management role. I was flying incognito, just heading back to New York for a conference. I didn't want to get involved initially, but... She lowered her voice. I've been watching how Derek has treated you. It's unacceptable. If you need any assistance reporting this, I can help. Ava felt a burst of validation. Thank you. I appreciate that, more than you know. This has been so surreal. Katie shifted her feet. I'm not high level, mind you, but I do know who to contact in HR and our customer service escalation department to ensure this incident is investigated thoroughly. For a second, Ava considered confiding her secret identity as a major shareholder, but she decided to wait. I'm definitely going to report this, she said, but we'll see how the rest of the flight goes. Katie nodded. If it escalates again, let me know. I can intervene officially. With that, she quietly returned to her seat, leaving Ava feeling a mix of gratitude and exhaustion. At least I have some corporate support on board, she thought. The notion that someone from inside Delta was on her side offered a glimmer of relief. Around 5 a.m. local time, the lights in the cabin gradually brightened. The flight attendants began prepping for landing. Ava felt a coil of tension in her gut, bracing for any last-minute confrontation. She eyed Derek, who busied himself in the galley, avoiding her gaze. Jacqueline stopped by one last time. Ms. Johnson, she said softly, we'll be landing soon. Do you need anything? Ava forced a tired smile. No, thank you. Jacqueline lingered, eyes full of empathy. I'm truly sorry about everything. If you write a complaint, please mention my name. I'll verify what happened. I will, Ava promised. Thank you for your kindness. Within half an hour, the pilot was on the intercom announcing their final approach into JFK. The cabin tensed again as tray tables were returned to their upright positions and seats were adjusted. Ava gazed out at the glittering lights of New York City in the pre-dawn darkness. Despite everything, she felt a sense of relief to be almost home. When the plane touched down, the abrupt jolt seemed to jar everyone's nerves again. As they taxied to the gate, Ava mentally prepared for the next phase of her ordeal. Would security or gate agents be waiting for her? Would someone from Delta's corporate offices intervene? Martin across the aisle mouthed a silent, "Are you okay?" Ava nodded. A few rows behind Katie gave her a discreet thumbs up of encouragement. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and passengers surged to gather their belongings. Ava decided to wait, letting the pushy throng exit first. She saw Derek near the front of the cabin, speaking with someone in a suit who appeared to be an airport official. A swirl of unease twisted in her stomach. Were they going to try something else? Sure enough, as Ava stepped off the plane into the jet bridge, that official approached her, flanked by Derek. Ms. Johnson, I'm Officer Daniels with Airport Security, the man said, holding up a badge. I'd like to speak with you briefly. Ava steeled herself. Of course, she nodded. Certainly. She glanced over her shoulder where Martin and Katie hovered protectively. She gave them a small nod to indicate she was fine. Derek wore a smug expression. Officer Daniels offered a neutral stance. We've been told there was some issue with your ticket and that you may have threatened a member of the crew. I'd like to verify a few details before we release you. A rush of anger flared. I threatened no one. And as the flight records clearly show, my ticket is valid. Officer Daniels glanced at Derek. She's alleged to have used intimidation tactics. Several passengers witnessed it. Derek insisted. Before Ava could respond, Katie Donovan stepped forward, brandishing her corporate ID. "Officer, I'm Katie Donovan, Delta Regional Management. I was on this flight. Ms. Johnson did not threaten anyone. I can personally attest that her seat assignment was accurate and that she was subject to repeated unjustified harassment." The officer raised an eyebrow at Derek. "Is that right?" Derek's smugness faltered. There are multiple complaints. You can check with Katie didn't let him finish. If you check official documents and speak to the flight attendant, Jacqueline, or the passenger, Martin Rhodes, you'll find that Ms. Johnson was the victim here. I'm prepared to escalate this matter within Delta, if needed." A flicker of doubt crossed Officer Daniels' face. He turned to Ava. "Do you want to proceed with any complaint against the airline or its staff?" Ava took a breath, remembering her father's words. "Sometimes the best move is the one that leaves no doubt as to your standing." She reached into her purse and pulled out a sleek black folder. Inside was a gold-embossed card, subtle yet unmistakable in its significance. Her airline ownership card. She held it out so only Officer Daniels could see. "I'm more than a passenger," she said quietly. "I'm a shareholder in Delta Airlines, a major shareholder, and I'll be pursuing this matter at the highest level." The effect was immediate. Officer Daniels' eyes widened slightly. He discreetly closed the folder and nodded. "I see," he murmured. "In that case, Ms. Johnson, you're free to go. If you wish to file a report, I'll cooperate fully." Derek, however, looked like he'd swallowed a bucket of ice. You can't just," Katie turned her gaze on him, her voice even. "Derek, it would be wise to stop. Now." And just like that, the tides of power shifted irrevocably. Ava, Katie, and Martin walked together through the terminal. The hustle and bustle of JFK at dawn provided a jarring contrast to the claustrophobic tension of the plane. After they found a quiet corner, Ava turned to her unexpected allies. "Thank you, both of you," Ava said. Her voice trembled slightly from the adrenaline still coursing through her system. "I don't know what I would have done without your support." Martin gave a small bow. "I only did what any decent person would do. I've encountered too many instances of discrimination in my life to stand by and let it happen again." Katie nodded, her expression serious. "I'm going to file an internal report immediately. Derek's behavior was unacceptable, especially the way he tried to rally passengers against you." She paused. "And if you'd like to formally escalate the complaint, I can guide you through the process." Ava squared her shoulders. "Yes, I intend to escalate it. No passenger should have to endure what I went through. And if it can happen to me, someone with insider connections to the airline, imagine how often it happens to people without that leverage." Katie's eyes glistened. I couldn't agree more. They exchanged contact information. Ava promised to keep them updated on her next steps, determined that justice would be served. Then Martin and Katie said their goodbyes, leaving Ava with a swirl of gratitude and lingering anger. Ava's first stop in New York was her father's Manhattan penthouse. Her father, James Johnson, was a quiet visionary, a man who had built a fortune through technology investments and philanthropic initiatives focusing on educational and economic empowerment for marginalized communities. He sat at a sleek glass table, sipping coffee as the morning sunlight poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows. As soon as Ava relayed her ordeal, James's expression darkened. "This is unacceptable," he said, his normally even voice trembling with controlled fury. "I invested in Delta believing it was moving forward in its inclusion and diversity initiatives." Ava placed a comforting hand on his arm. I know. It's not about the entire airline, Dad. There are good people there, Jacqueline. Katie, even the captain wasn't malicious, just misguided. James exhaled, running a hand over his short-cropped salt and pepper hair. Still, we can't let this slide. If employees on the front line can get away with this, it tarnishes the entire corporate mission. It sends the message that racism is tolerated. Ava nodded. I've already made contact with Katie Donovan from Delta Corporate. She's going to help me file an internal complaint and possibly speak with the board. But I think we need to do more. James studied his daughter, pride and concern mingling in his gaze. What do you have in mind? A small, determined smile tugged at Ava's lips. I want to ensure real change. That might involve press coverage, re-evaluation of training programs, a genuine reckoning. I'm not doing this for personal vengeance. I'm doing it for every black or marginalized person who's been humiliated and discriminated against while traveling. Her father nodded. That's the right approach. I'll support you however I can. They talked strategy, considering how best to leverage Ava's shareholder status without causing undue harm to the many dedicated employees who had nothing to do with the incident. They agreed that shining a light on the problem was the first step to eradicating it. 2 days later, Ava found herself in a sleek conference room high above Midtown Manhattan. The panoramic windows offered a sweeping view of the city, but the atmosphere inside the room was tense. Seated around a polished wooden table were several Delta executives, including Katie Donovan, along with a representative from Human Resources and the Diversity and Inclusion team. Ava recounted her experience in detail from the moment Derek questioned her boarding pass to the final confrontation at JFK. She spoke calmly but firmly, laying out every instance of harassment and intimidation. Katie corroborated parts of Ava's story, offering her own eyewitness testimony. Jacqueline had submitted a written statement as well, backing Ava's account. The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some took notes while others stared at Ava with expressions of shock or dismay. Eventually, one of them, a vice president named Carolyn Chambers, spoke up. Ms. Johnson, on behalf of Delta, I want to extend our sincerest apologies. This behavior is absolutely not representative of our values. We will initiate a full investigation into Derek's conduct, and if necessary, disciplinary action will be taken. Ava nodded. I appreciate that, Ms. Chambers, but an investigation targeting one individual isn't enough. There were multiple passengers who felt emboldened to act on their biases. This suggests a broader cultural issue, perhaps a lack of proper training on handling discriminatory complaints. We need a systemic fix. Caroline pursed her lips. We've already increased our training modules for flight attendants. However, hearing your story makes me realize we may need to revisit and intensify those efforts. Ava looked each executive in the eye, her voice unwavering. I'm here not just because of what happened to me, but for everyone who can't advocate for themselves. I want Delta to stand as an airline that truly upholds its claim of fairness and equality. Caroline's face softened. We have resources to do more, Ms. Johnson, and with your input as a shareholder, perhaps we can shape a new program. A flicker of hope ignited in Ava. This is how change begins, she thought, one conversation at a time, backed by unwavering resolve. Word of Ava's ordeal couldn't remain behind corporate doors forever. A fellow passenger, perhaps the young couple in first class or someone in economy, had recorded snippets of the confrontation with Derek and posted them online. Within days, the video clips went viral under the headline, Flight Attendant Harasses Black Woman in First Class. News outlets picked it up, and soon Ava's inbox was flooded with interview requests. She consulted with her father and decided to give a measured, thoughtful interview with a major news network. In the interview, she didn't highlight her shareholder status as much as she highlighted the need for fairness and anti-discrimination policies across the travel industry. Public sentiment was overwhelmingly supportive. Social media lit up with hashtags like #FlyingWhileBlack and #AirlineEquality. Advocacy groups for racial justice chimed in, calling for stricter enforcement of anti-discrimination laws in the airline industry. Delta, now under the scrutiny of the public eye, released a statement affirming their commitment to a thorough investigation and improved policies. They also announced a temporary suspension of Derek pending the outcome. Behind the scenes, more flight attendants stepped forward with stories of witnessing or experiencing racial bias within the company's ranks. A month after the incident, Ava received a formal letter from Delta's HR department. It summarized the findings of the internal investigation, multiple passenger and crew testimonies, confirmed Derek's discriminatory conduct. It also revealed that he had previous complaints lodged against him for rude treatment of minority passengers, though none had been as thoroughly documented as Ava's case. The letter stated that Derek's employment with Delta had been terminated. While Ava found a certain satisfaction in knowing he would face consequences, she took no joy in another person's downfall. She believed strongly in redemption and the possibility that people could learn and grow, but she reasoned not at the expense of victims. Reports circulated that Derek, unable to secure new employment in the airline industry, due to the media coverage, filed a lawsuit against Delta for wrongful termination. The suit didn't gain much traction. The widespread evidence, including passenger videos and official statements, painted a clear picture of misconduct. Eventually, the lawsuit was dismissed. Rumors also swirled that Derek had lost friends over the controversy. Some relatives distanced themselves from him, ashamed of his behavior. Ava heard through the grapevine that he'd begun attending diversity workshops and therapy sessions to address his biases, possibly seeking to rebuild his life. In an unlikely twist of fate, several of the passengers who had complained about Ava on that flight faced public scrutiny after they were identified in the viral video. One, a minor online celebrity, lost sponsorship deals due to his apparent racist statements captured on camera. Another, a business executive, faced internal investigations at his company, which prided itself on inclusivity. Ava tried not to revel in these outcomes. Karma has its ways, she thought, but a part of her was relieved to see tangible repercussions for those who had participated in the harassment or refused to stand up against it. In the months that followed, Delta, propelled by the blowback from Ava's case, implemented a series of workshops and training modules for all staff, ground cabin crew, and management alike on racial bias, conflict resolution, and bystander intervention. They also streamlined their complaint process to ensure swift, impartial investigations aiming to restore public confidence. Ava was invited to sit on an advisory panel for the airline, contributing her insights as both a shareholder and a woman of color with extensive travel experience. She recognized that corporate culture doesn't change overnight, but she felt a renewed sense of purpose in helping guide these efforts. Meanwhile, Katie Donovan was promoted and assigned to lead a newly formed diversity and inclusion task force. With Ava's support, the task force developed policies that encouraged staff to intervene when they witness acts of discrimination similar to how Katie and Jacqueline had done. Throughout this journey, Ava found herself reflecting on the paradox of anonymity versus advocacy. She'd always cherished her private life, wanting to succeed based on merit rather than her family's fortune or her stake in the airline. But now she saw that sometimes one's position could be the lever to effect broader social change. She also reflected on the emotional toll of that flight. The memory of those suspicious stares and whispered accusations still stung. Yet in the face of adversity, she had discovered unexpected allies. Martin Rhodes, Katie Donovan, Jacqueline, and even Captain Reynolds' people who, despite initial hesitation, had recognized wrongdoing and worked to correct it. Ava realized that progress is never a straight line. It's riddled with setbacks, but each stand against injustice paves the way for a better future. Chapter 25. Conclusion of the journey. 6 months after that fateful flight, Ava found herself in the lounge at JFK, waiting to board another Delta plane, this time heading back to Los Angeles for a corporate function. She clutched her first-class boarding pass, heart pounding with residual anxiety. But she reminded herself, things have changed. And indeed, as she boarded the flight, attendants greeted her with genuine warmth and respect. Ava settled into her seat, noting how the airline had added subtle but significant changes in training and culture. The atmosphere felt different, freer, more inclusive. She took a moment to reflect on the chain of events, the blatant discrimination, her quiet refusal to capitulate, the dramatic reveal of her shareholder card, and the resulting fallout that rippled beyond one flight. Despite the ugliness she'd encountered, the final result was one of progress. Lives had changed. Policies had been updated, and hopefully future passengers would be spared the humiliation she'd endured. She leaned back, closed her eyes, and let the hum of the aircraft lull her into a peaceful confidence. In that moment, she knew she hadn't just won a seat for herself. She'd helped open the door for countless others to claim their rightful seats in the sky. They say the sky's the limit, but sometimes it's in the sky that we face our deepest limitations. When Ava Johnson stepped onto Flight 472, bound for New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport, she expected a typical journey home. But before she could even buckle her seatbelt, suspicious stares and hushed murmurs gnawed at the edges of her peace. By the time the flight attendants approached her, telling her she didn't belong in the first-class seat she had paid for in full, the stage was set for a confrontation that would rattle the entire aircraft and reveal a shocking twist no one saw coming. If this story shows us anything, it's that discrimination can appear in the most unexpected places, even 30,000 feet in the air. Yet Ava Johnson's unwavering resolve and quiet strength prove that injustice need not go unchallenged. By calmly asserting her rights and ultimately revealing her stake in the airline, she demonstrated that courage can dismantle prejudice and spur institutional change. We've witnessed how a single flight can become a battleground for justice, and how the aftermath can reverberate, sparking policy reforms that might protect future travelers from similar indignities. Ava's story stands as a testament to the power of speaking up, the importance of unity among strangers, and the hope that lies in small acts of resistance. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps ensure more stories of resilience and transformation reach those who need to hear them.